I'm Janet Van Huysse, head of people at Cloudflare and co-founder of TendLab.
Hi, I'm Amy Henderson, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of TendLab.
So Amy, it's so good to see you. We've been friends and co-founders for a few years, and I was thinking back to how it all began for us. And at that point, I was head of HR at Twitter, and I was really concerned about retaining women in leadership positions, and we had a really great lunch conversation about that. And then fast forward a bit as you start really getting into the research that's really the basis of TendLab, so the neuroscience, evolutionary biology, leadership skills, gender studies, around these skills that people develop when they engage in the act of parenting, right? These leadership skills. And so with my head of HR hat on, I thought, wow, why are we not valuing parents more in the workplace? If you're telling me that the money that we're spending on our learning development programs, millions of dollars to get our employees and our leaders to develop these skills, that parents gain those skills by just being a parent, it was a big aha moment for me. And so it kind of moved me from how do we retain women in leadership positions to really how do we change the narrative around parents in the workplace, because they are bringing skills back to work that we really value. And it was a great epiphany for me and really got us on this path with TendLab.
Yeah, that was an aha moment for me too when you said that, because I'd been doing all this research and I knew someday I was going to do something with it, but I didn't know what. And so when you said, oh my God, that's exactly what we're training people for. Those are the skills that are needed today in the workplace. I went, yes, now I know what to do with all this stuff.
Yeah, and I'd spent years doing roundtables with parents at Twitter. So it started with new moms and returning moms. Mom's returning from leave and mom's about to go on leave. And then we had the dads, right, about to go on leave and newly returned. And then the managers of parents on leave or returning from leave. And I had thought that I'd heard their struggles and all the negativity that they put on themselves around how they think their performance is suffering at work, or all the challenges about juggling both things. And I just felt this is what we need, is this very evidence-based research to support that. You go out on your leave and you're an engaged parent, you are going to be better at work. And that is a narrative we all needed to hear. I always said that definitely the parents, but all of us who work with parents.
Knowing that you'd had such commitment to and such success in working with parents at Twitter, and that you had this aha moment that what I was learning about the skills parenthood develops are career critical, I then started courting you. And for a long time, it was like, Janet, I'm waiting for you over here to join me. And it took some time, but you did.
Well, it took time because I was trying to take a break from work and refill the well. So yes, it took time.
It took time, and it was so well worth it, because what we're able to do together now is incredibly powerful, because we're combining your experience holding these forums at Twitter with all the research that I've collected over the years to now go into companies and say, look, this is what's possible with parenthood. These are all the skills that are valuable, not just for parent employees, but for the entire company, that we want to foster the development of. And how can we meaningfully support parents so that we can develop those skills and develop the culture that those skills will allow us to have here in the company. And so it's especially fun for me to be working with you as you are the head of people at Cloudflare. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to blend this together in real time for a company that's growing so quickly at such an important moment in the development of your culture.
Yeah, and I feel lucky that TendLab happened, so now we can bring this into Cloudflare, right? And so you've now come and done the keynote presentations a few times. You're doing focus groups with our employees worldwide. We've done the educational workshops, the monthly or the every week for a month workshops with new moms. And so I love that we're bringing that narrative here, and we get to benefit from all TendLab's work, and I think it'll help build a better workforce. I don't know how much you talk about this at other companies, but we definitely get a lot why parents. One of my hypotheses around this is the needs of parents and the accommodations or the culture and the environment that they're going to thrive in, that they're going to be really successful in, are basically the same needs that all of our workforce has. It's just parents are a little bit easier to kind of categorize and galvanize. And so I thought if we could just crack the parent code, we'll actually have a better workforce for everyone. And so do you hear that at other companies, or?
No, I definitely do. And that's why one of our initial potential names for TendLab was the Canary.
Yes.
Right? Based on the idea that, when a canary goes into the coal mine, if they die, that it's a toxic environment for humans too, but the canary is more likely to die much quicker than a human. And parents are the same way, that if it's a workplace where they can't survive or thrive, that it's actually probably not good for anyone else either. Like as a quick example, one of the companies that we did some work with who chose to remain nameless publicly, we found that parents were really suffering because the average age of the workforce was somewhere around 25. There were a lot of new managers who didn't know how to conduct meetings, and so everybody was having very poorly run meetings that they were inviting everybody to. They were posturing. They just weren't a good use of anyone's time, but parents were acutely impacted by it because they had such limited time outside of work to do the work that they weren't able to do while they were sitting in all these meetings. And so solving for that for parents actually had such a huge impact on the rest of the company that, that was one small example in which we were able to prove our canary theory. But what we're doing at Cloudflare is so exciting because we're taking this concept of parenthood and the way that it can be a barometer of the health and wellness of an organization, and we're using it in a really constructive way to go ask everyone. And we learned this early on when we worked with our first company, Plum Organics. We went in and we just stood up and talked about how wonderful parenting was, and the people who weren't parents were like, hey, they were pissed. They were pissed. They were like, wait a minute, what about us? Like, how come parents get all these special concessions? So we've since learned that parenthood at work impacts everyone. Whether or not you have children, you have people on your team who are going to go out on leave, who are going to need to leave early, who are not going to be able to do the last minute business trip. So parenting at work impacts everyone. And if you want to solve for parenthood at work, you have to solve specifically for parenthood in a way that acknowledges and holds the space for everyone's needs to be met.
We also learned in that workshop too that to just have a rose-colored glasses on about parenthood also didn't feel real because it isn't real. Like, parenting is much more complicated than that.
When we did our first workshop presentation, we stood up and we were like, parenting is awesome, it's great. And we didn't talk about the discrimination, the pain, or the shame. Yeah, we're like, here's all the skills. And so at the end of it, we were like ready to pop champagne and aren't we great? And everybody in the audience was sort of like,
Yeah, I missed a little bit there, yeah. So will you talk about the evolution that you've had around bringing in, dads, the managers, everyone who works with parents? Because I do feel like that was we didn't start there. You didn't start there, but you're there now.
Yeah, and you're important in that development too, because like you said you started from the place of like, how do we retain moms in the workplace, because it's a leaky bucket. And I started when I was out on maternity leave with my third child from a place of, okay, moms are suffering, I'm suffering. This is clearly a female mom thing. And when you and I first met, you were like, nope, you got to include the dads. And I was like, no, I don't want to. It's like my 3-year-old having a tantrum. They don't understand. I don't want to. And your advocacy, some of the most accomplished moms that I interviewed and the neuroscience research all forced me to reconsider my own personal relationship at home with my husband. I learned that a dad's brain can change as much as a mom's if he takes on responsibility. So I started waking him up at night when our third was crying. And for the first two, he snored like all through them sleeping. With the third, I started waking him up, and over time, he began to wake up before me when she woke up at night. And now they have a very sweet bond. And I think even sometimes she prefers him over me. And I have to say, it's really transformed him too. He's been given promotions and offers at work that would never have happened before because he's developed the skills that parenthood develops, like the capacity to, be profoundly empathetic and to collaborate well with others. It's been much better for our marriage too. So I've seen it firsthand, that fathers really are critical to this conversation. And I think if we are going to move the needle, it can't be a mom's only conversation. We have to include dads and parents who are of all genders in this conversation if we're really going to create the change that we all need.
And I love that you have research that supports that too. Instead of it just being, it feels like the right thing to do, that the neuroscience and the evolutionary biology does support that these changes can happen in men and non-birth parents. And I found that really fascinating, and I loved how inclusive that was.
I think the way we're going as a culture is towards this understanding that everyone can develop capacities within themselves that have traditionally been sort of associated with one gender or the other, but that if we're going to be successful, we have to sort of embrace all sides of ourselves, both what would be considered masculine and what would be considered feminine.
So you've been, I have my experience as an HR leader, and especially at my last company now here at Cloudflare, being able to really make this an important initiative across the company. As you talk with other companies, where are you finding the most success or the easiest way to move things forward? And where do you find the biggest roadblocks?
Well, we've really struggled with this at TendLab because our first client fell into our lap. They were like, yes, you're fantastic, come work with us. But it was the marketing dollars that paid for us to come in and do in-depth internal work, which they then branded with us externally. This is Plum Organics, the baby food company. And then after that, we really struggled to figure out where inside the company does the money come from to work with us, because we aren't a perk or a benefit like breast milk shipping, which is critical, and I fully support that, or subsidized childcare, or we're not a simple benefit, and generally HR leaders don't have huge budgets to bring in external consultants to do the work that they feel is under their scope anyways, and so we really struggled to figure out where does the money come from and where do we sit inside a company. To date, I would have to say that still the vast majority of our engagements that have had any substance beyond shorter term workshops have been paid through the marketing budgets or from an executive who has a budget that they can discretionarily spend on us.
Seriously, that has definitely been my experience as well. And so we've talked about this, I call it the saving Sarah, is when you've got this really high performing, really critical talent woman leader who just had her second child or first, and the executive is really nervous to lose her, so they want to do all these things. What can we do to save Sarah? And then it was easy for me to ask for budget money for my head of revenue because Sarah was a sales leader, and all of a sudden, I had someone to really help split the costs with me, and that's how I found a lot of my D&I initiatives got some runway, is because I would partner with a key leader who had deeper pockets than I did as an HR leader, and so that rings very true for me as well. The other thing too, what I'm finding, or I'm starting to debunk the myth, is that you can do it yourself, because I'm like, wow, this is my baby to talk about parents in the workplace, but I find that because I am the head of HR and I'm the leader and I'm in the company, people, I think they're open with me to an extent. But I think in the focus groups that you've had at Cloudflare, I'm finding I'm getting much better intelligence around how our employees are thriving and where they have obstacles, because it's someone who doesn't work at the company, right? I imagine they're saying that, I feel safer talking to you because you don't work here.
I have to say, coming into Cloudflare, we're doing this global listening tour, so I'm coming to each of the offices, sharing our research, and then holding space for moms, dads, managers, everyone to come and share their experiences in confidential, safe spaces, where I then take what I learn, anonymize it, and share it with you so that you can advocate on behalf of parents. And people are so grateful to have a safe space where they can air their concerns and where they can hear from others and learn that they're not alone. I can't tell you how many people tell me how thankful they are to you for bringing me in. And just yesterday here at the San Francisco office, a dad told me, look, I needed to say what I said here today, and if you hadn't created this forum, it would have come out in a much uglier way. But now I feel like I can really positively do something about what I'm experiencing in a way that can create really great change for everyone. And I think
I love hearing that.
Yeah, and it makes me feel so good too, because we know Cloudflare is an incredible company, and thank you for hosting us in your space here today for this too. Cloudflare is an incredible company, and you're an incredible leader who's really on the frontier of supporting parents. But the reality is that being a working parent in today's workplace, in the American culture, which does not meaningfully support parents, is really hard, and there's a lot of pain around it, and there's a lot of room for growth everywhere. And so proactively addressing that by creating constructive environments where people can be honest is so powerful. And everyone that has come to these sessions has been so very grateful.
I also felt like I don't have the research in the background. I haven't interviewed hundreds of high-performing executive parents like you have. I don't have the neuroscience, evolutionary biology, so I felt like I could have the conversation so far, but I couldn't really get in depth because one of the things I love most is when our employees do like a Q&A with you and you nerd out on the science. Like I love that, especially, we're a technology company. And so our engineers, will really get into the science behind it. I mean, all of our employees will get into the science behind it, but particularly the engineers, and it lands so well with them. And so I feel like we're able to impact maybe people who would have been more on the sidelines or more detractors around the initiatives, that we're getting them to participate in the conversation because of the science behind it. And that's something I just could never offer. Yeah.
About a year ago, we did a workshop at Yelp, and there was a man who wasn't yet a dad, but was a manager of parents, who came up to me afterwards and said, I feel like I should immediately go out and have kids so I can be better at my job. And I was like, yes, because he was an engineering manager, and he was very sort of, factually based, and was like, there's data behind this, I should go do this. And I thought, wow, that is such a shift in the way that in the workplace, particularly today, that we perceive parenthood as really a liability, but our belief is that it's an asset. And if you can acknowledge the truth of how hard it is, and then meet that with deep support and understanding for all parents and people who work with parents, you can really, like we're seeing here, you can really create a very positive culture that impacts everyone.
One of the things that I have found, whether it was at my last job, this job, and talking with you, is people think you have to be like at the forefront, top tier of all the benefits around working parents, and it's kind of like an all or nothing, right? They call it the arms race, the parental
leave arms race.
Yes. And one of the things that I loved hearing from you in the research, and I think it gave me comfort as an HR leader, is like it isn't about all of that. There are many things that, depending on what's appropriate for you and your culture and your budget at your company, that you can do that make a difference. Can you walk people through what those things are?
Oh, that's such a great question. Thank you for asking that. So one of the things that I've also been a part of since starting TendLab is a group called the Parents and Tech Alliance. And it's all of the parents, leading the parents groups at all of the big tech companies here in the Bay. And we've been coming together roughly quarterly for about 3 years now. And at the first several meetings, what we did is we went around the room. I'm not a parent from a tech company, but I'm associated with Janet, so they invited me. And so the women went around the room, and some dads who've since joined the group, and talked about what it is that their companies offer. And so some of them had these incredible benefits, like you get $5,000 when you have a kid, and you get 4 months of paid leave for moms and dads, and there's lactation consultants that wander the halls. I mean, these incredible benefits. But what it came down to really was much more around the culture of the company, like how meaningfully are you supported once you return from work and showing up for parenting? Do you have the ability to be seen as an asset in the workplace instead of a liability? Can you have honest and transparent conversations about how hard it is, knowing that those challenges are forging you as an employee? And that other research shows, outside of just these conversations I've had with the Parents and Tech Alliance, that the culture in which a parent returns from leave is actually more important than the duration of leave that they have, provided that there is a certain significant chunk of leave available. And so
what is that number? So if I'm a head of HR and I'm at a small company of 30 people, I'm like, so is it 8 weeks? Is it 12? Is it 16? Like, what is there a real number?
Yeah. So it's a little tricky, and the woman that I'm thinking of who's done the bulk of this research, her name is Ellen Kosick, and she teaches she's a professor in Michigan. She's done a lot of work around work-life integration, and her research looked at around the 12-week mark. I know Google, when they expanded to 16 weeks, they had a 50% increase in retention. And one of the organizations that is near and dear to our hearts, Plus, that is working to win paid leave here in the US, they're advocating for 6 months of paid leave for everyone. I think that would, of course, be ideal. But I think in Ellen Kosick's case, she found that provided there's around 12 weeks, that it's actually the return process and the flexibility available for the long haul of parenting, rather than just that initial burst, is more critical to the success and the retention and the productivity of parents.
I mean, I think that's huge to know that. Because every company is going to be at different stages, and things are going to be appropriate at different stages. Yeah. And so just to know that, okay, if I could do 12 weeks and really do a great job when people return, and because honestly, that doesn't cost companies anything.
the great job when people return. Yeah, you know, we've talked about like, could there be a manual that people get before they leave and when they come back that's like, here's how you're becoming better, even though it feels really hard right now. I'd love to know from you, like, what you're hopeful for the future. Like, what do you think is possible? Like, you could talk specifically about Cloudflare because I'm working there, or just in general, like for parents in the workplace.
Yeah, I guess for me, I want to go back to our earlier point about when you create an environment that works for parents, that allows parents to thrive, it benefits your entire company. So I'm looking forward to a world in which we aren't having to say that parents are the canary in the coal mine. We just build workforces and workplaces and culture that just they seamlessly integrate across the employee groups. Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's great because, you know, even though our company is focused on meaningfully supporting parenthood, really what we're trying to say is let's create workplace cultures that are really healthy for everyone. Yeah. Let's work ourselves out of a job.
Yes.
Let's work ourselves out of a business.
That's what we want.
If we're successful.
Yes.